Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight, in our ongoing series on Medal of Honor winners, we're going to honor Sergeant Santiago J. Erevia, who died recently at the age of 69. Sergeant Erevia won his Medal of Honor for his heroic actions on May 21, 1969, during the Vietnam War while defending the military base near Tam Ky in South Vietnam. Sergeant Erevia, who is of Hispanic descent, was not awarded the Medal of Honor until March of 2014 because, like two of our other recent Medal of Honor winners, Tibor Rubin and George Staccato, he was originally denied the honor because of discrimination over his heritage. It took a 12-year investigation by the Pentagon that was mandated by Congress for Sergeant Erevia and 23 others to ultimately receive their awards. Sergeant Erevia was a nice Hispanic boy from San Antonio, and here he is telling a little bit of the story of how he enlisted.
I had gone from one meaningless job to another, working in restaurants, just living from day to day. And I said, well, if I join the Army, maybe I'll get some opportunities down the road. And so I volunteered for the draft.
He was assigned to Company C, 1st Battalion, 501st Infantry, 101st Airborne Division, and ultimately sent to Tam Ky. 1969 was the first year where the United States began to de-escalate the Vietnam War after the escalation of 1965 through 68. The background was that Richard Nixon was now president after the Johnson administration. The Paris peace talks between the North Vietnamese and the United States had begun, and both sides were looking for an advantage in what the United States hoped would be a negotiated settlement. Nixon was planning an air war over North Vietnam and over Cambodia in an attempt to swing the negotiations toward an American advantage. But ground fighting in 1969 was still fierce, and the most fierce month of all was May. The North Vietnamese were looking to acquire as much territory as possible during the negotiation and frankly to kill as many Americans as possible to increase anti-war sentiment in the United States. Meanwhile, the Americans were looking to defend territory. Their role was gradually being switched to a defensive one, although they would still take as much territory as possible strategically. In May of 1969, the North Vietnamese started a post-Tet offensive across most of the northern regions of South Vietnam, and the bloodiest battle was in the middle 2 weeks of that month at Hamburger Hill. That battle was in the western regions near Laos. In the eastern regions near the South China Sea, there was another fierce battle, although less publicized, the Battle for Nguyen Hill, where American forces had to retake and defend a hill that had been overrun by the NVA and the Viet Cong. There was a fierce firefight between the Charlie Tigers and the NVA, and the mop-up operation took place a week later at the nearby military base at Tam Ky, and that's where then Specialist 4 Erevia found himself. Here's the story of what happened that day.
During the assault, Erevia's M16 malfunctioned and his captain ordered him to care for the wounded. His position soon became under attack from underground enemy bunkers.
Some kind of wall, and we were there briefly, and the captain ordered everybody to get in line, and we had to clear. They had to cross about 150 yards of paddy rice, or whatever you want to call it, and there was a little mountainside. And so everybody started, trying to cross, get across and be alive when you cross. On the hill, they were barely entrenched into what you call spider holes, bunkers, or whatever you want to call those. And they were spaced out, like maybe every 10 yards or something like that. I stayed behind before everybody crossed, but I was ordered to stay with some of the wounded that we bought, that were trying to cross. And when the captain crossed, he was against like a hillside, sort of like to protect him from the incoming fire,
Erevia, armed with 2 M16s and a handful of grenades, along with his friend, Specialist Patrick Dill, moved to an offensive position near a tree.
We crossed and joined the captain, and the captain said, you and Dill, see if you can knock out some of those fortifications, I asked Dill, I said, Dill, do you see anything to your side? He never answered. And I said, Dill, And I turned around and he was laying on the ground with a bullet hole square on his forehead. He got shot in the forehead and died instantly before he hit the ground. And I was in a very precarious position, whereas what do I do now? Do I crawl back to the captain? What? So anyway, I had taken another M16 from one of my buddies that were hit, and I took as many grenades as I could, under here, and there. And so I had about 4 or 5 grenades. And I said, well, what do I do now? So I said, well, you can die just like anybody else. So I decided to charge. My Army training came in handy. They train you to fire and hit the ground and get as close to the enemy as you can, and which I did. Got close enough. I threw a grenade at the defending guy and got him out of the way. And then I just did the same for the other one and the third one. And on the fourth guy, that he came out of the spider hole, and he was just like as far as you are from me. And I took him out with the M16. He was firing into the air. I don't know why, but it was my luck that he was shooting at this guy instead of shooting at me.
Well, American forces held their position that day. Spec 4 Erevia was eventually promoted to sergeant. He left the military in 1970 and joined the Texas National Guard, and eventually he joined the United States Postal Service. He was awarded a Purple Heart and the Distinguished Service Cross, but it took 45 years from that day in Tam Ky for him to go to the White House to receive his Medal of Honor. Here is the description of his service that day at the White House ceremony.
Specialist for Santiago J. Erevia, United States Army. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Specialist for Santiago J. Erevia, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Specialist for Santiago J. Erevia distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as a radio telephone operator in Company C, 1st Battalion Air Mobile, 501st Infantry, 101st Airborne Division Air Mobile during search and clear mission near Tam Ky, Republic of Vietnam on May 21, 1969. After breaching an insurgent perimeter, Specialist for Erevia was designated by his platoon leader to render first aid to several casualties, and the rest of the platoon moved forward. As he was doing so, he came under intense hostile fire from 4 bunkers to his left front. Although he could have taken cover with the rest of the element, he chose a retaliatory course of action. With heavy enemy fire directed at him, he moved in full view of the hostile gunners as he proceeded to crawl from one wounded man to another, gathering ammunition. Armed with 2 M16 rifles and several hand grenades, he charged toward the enemy positions behind the suppressive fire of the 2 rifles. Under very intense fire, he continued to advance on the insurgents until he was near the first bunker. Disregarding the enemy fire, he pulled the pin from a hand grenade and advanced on the bunker, leveling suppressive fire until he could drop the grenade into the bunker, mortally wounding the insurgent and destroying the fortification. Without hesitation, he employed identical tactics as he proceeded to eliminate the next 2 enemy positions. With the destruction of the 3rd bunker, Specialist for Erevia had exhausted his supply of hand grenades. Still under intense fire from the 4th position, he courageously charged forward behind the fire emitted by his M16 rifles. Arriving at the very edge of the bunker, he silenced the occupant within the fortification at point-blank range. Through his heroic actions, the lives of the wounded were saved, and the members of the company command post were relieved from a very precarious situation. His exemplary performance in the face of overwhelming danger was an inspiration to his entire company and contributed immeasurably to the success of the mission. Specialist for Erevia's conspicuous gallantry, extraordinary heroism, and intrepidity at the risk of his own life above and beyond the call of duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army.
thought I'd linger on that applause for a second because it took so long for him to get it. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps, Sergeant Santiago J. Erevia. We want to thank you for your service. We cannot begin to repay the debt that we owe you. You and the others like you have our undying gratitude.